Hello everyone, my name is Finding Pepper and welcome back to another episode of the Tile Scrolling Platformer expansion, where we will be expanding on a tutorial series made by Griffpatch. This is part 2 of Grabbable Objects, where we'll be taking our objects that we made last part, that is the trampoline and the POW block, and we will give them the ability to be held and thrown. Now if you haven't watched part 1, I recommend you go do that now. And that itself has a prerequisite, the P-switch tutorial. However, the P-switch tutorial isn't necessary for that tutorial. You can do everything in it just minus the P-switch things if you want to. But anyways, let's start by reviewing what we did last time. So, we got our trampolines. And we can bounce on them, but we cannot pick them up. We also have POW blocks and our P-switches. So this episode will add the functionality to carry those three things, as well as the Koopa shell. Now we're going to start with something that I meant to do last time, but I didn't get around to doing, and that's having our POW blocks explode brick blocks. So in the tile sprite, we'll just get a when I receive POW explosion event receiver. Check if it's one of the brick tiles. And for me that is tile 70 and tile 75. Now if it is, we'll go over here and grab these. This is just what happens when we break a brick normally. Because they are animating, we will have to check if tile index of tile grid is 70 or 75. There you go. Alright, with that done, let's move into the new things. We are going to need some new costumes for Mario when he is holding the objects. So we'll go over to my assets project, there's a link in the description, and we will grab those assets. Here we are. We will go over to the correct sprite, this one, open our backpack, drag it in, the entire sprite, close the backpack, and head back over to our project. Once here, we'll open our backpack, drop in our sprite, and look at the costumes we have. So we have some Mario holding things, and that is it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and drag each of these into the Mario sprite. It's important to make sure they are in this order here. Okay, so let's check, make sure we got all of them. We have 4 normal Marios, 5 mini Marios, and 4 Fire Marios. Before the time of the recording and the time I'm going to post this video, I will add some Mario sprite for Mario going in and out of doors while holding objects. And that is for if you've also done the keys and doors tutorial. I'm not going to show you how to add those in this tutorial, but you can probably figure it out. It's not too difficult. Okay, so let's go into the enemy sprite. This is where all the action will be happening today. Let's check the Tic Tac trampoline custom block. We'll do this one first. So we're going to make 2 new variables, one for all sprites called holding. Now this will be either 1 or 0. If it's 1, then Mario is holding something. If it's 0, then Mario is not holding something. We'll also make a variable called held for this sprite only, and that's also going to be either 1 or 0, but it's going to be for the object, so the object itself knows if it's being held or if it's not. Now we're actually going to make a new custom block called hold. I'm going to run that without screen refresh. And this block we'll use in all of the different types that can be held. Now we're going to need a key press event for when Mario presses the key to pick things up, And we do that sort of stuff in the controls sprite. So we'll make a new variable. I'll call it hold button. And I'm going to make that the V key. And you can make it whatever you want. So if you've already done the keys indoors tutorial, I used the V key in that too, so you might want to shuffle around the keys a little bit. So we're going to check if else, if key V pressed. If it is, we will change hold button by 1, and otherwise we will set hold button to 0. Because we're changing it by 1 and not setting it to 1, we can use if hold button equals 1 check to determine if it's the very first frame that the button was pressed. So that can be pretty useful. So we'll go into the enemy sprite, back to our hold block. And now we'll get an if and use that check I was talking about. If hold button of controls equals 1, then we need to make sure that Mario's not already holding something. So if holding equals 0, then we need to make sure we're actually touching Mario, because Mario can't pick something up unless he's touching it. Then we will set holding to 1, and we will also set held to 1. Remember, holding is whether Mario is holding something, and held is whether the object itself is held. Okay, speaking of held, we're going to check down here if held equals 1. If it is, we're going to go to Mario's position. So set X to X of Mario, and for now we'll just set Y to Y of Mario. We'll change that in a moment. We'll also set falling to 1. Now, if we're no longer holding the button, we are going to throw the object. So if hold button equals 0, we'll set holding to 0 and set held to 0. This is just very beginnings, but let's try that out. Of course, we can't pick it up because I didn't put the hold block on the Take Trampoline block. So we'll just stick the hold right here before Paint Sprite. Run that again. And now, you see, we can hold it. Okay, and we turn into this. So, we can hold it, then it goes with us, and we can drop it. And yes, first issue. So let's fix that. So the reason this is happening is in here. If touching Mario, we need to make sure that we are not holding, or that is that this object is not actively being held. So if held equals 0, then we can bounce on the trampoline. Okay, so you'll notice we cannot pick this back up, and that is because we need to set holding to 0 in the reset player block, in the player sprite. Okay, so now we should be able to pick it up again. And now we cannot use the trampoline as a jetpack. But, as you can see, this holding thing is not very nice. So, we'll go into the enemies. And first of all, we'll position the object above Mario's head. So, to do that, instead of setting Y to Y of Mario, we will set it to Y of Mario plus the height of the object. And remember, the height of an enemy is actually half its height. Then we're going to add to that the height of Mario, and we're actually going to get a multiplication here. Height of Mario, and then we're going to multiply this by a not in here. I know this looks strange, but not Mario equals Mini. So Mini Mario's height is actually the same as Big Mario's height. So the middle, the XY position of Mini Mario is actually on its head, the top of its head. So we just won't add that extra height of Big Mario if Mario is Mini. So let's try that out. There we go. Now it is above the head. Now let's just get that mushroom and just see if it goes above our head. Yep, it does. Perfect. So we want Mario to not just drop the object, but actually throw the object. So that's what we'll do next. So in here, where we set holding to 0 and held to 0, we'll also set the speed x and speed y variables. We'll set speed y to 5, and we'll set speed x to the direction of Mario divided by 10. Okay, so if Mario is facing to the right, it will go to the right. If Mario is facing to the left, it will go to the left. Right now, we only have a move sprite Y block here. We also need a move sprite X block. We'll grab this. There we go, throw it. Now you'll notice it just keeps sliding along the ground, which is not something we want. So up here, we'll check if falling equals 0, so that means it's on the ground. Then we'll just slow it down. Set speed x to round speed x times 0.4. Alright, put that right after move sprite x. This will just slow it to a stop fairly quickly. There we go. That looks very nice. Now, it's also a feature in Mario where you can drop an object. Instead of throwing it, we would press the down arrow key and just drop it on the ground. Okay, so at the bottom of the hold block, we will duplicate hold button here, and we'll instead check for down of controls is greater than 0. So if we press down, then we'll again set holding and held to 0, but this time we'll set speed y to -1 and set speed x to direction of Mario divided by 30. Less speed. There we go. That works pretty well. Let's take a look at one more thing. So if we grab the trampoline, we stand next to this pipe, and we let go, it disappears. Where did it go? So what is happening here is that as we let go, it is inside of a block. So it goes wacko and disappears. So let's look at the spawn type block. Here, we can set the width of our trampoline to be the width of Mario. That way, if we let go right next to a pipe or another wall, it will be the same as the width of Mario, so it will be able to be there without any problems. That does mean that it will be able to go inside the wall a little bit, but that is okay. This is the simplest way to do it. There are probably some other more difficult things you could do, but this works well enough, so I'm just going to do this. Now, that's just one of our 3 blocks. Let's do the others. Let's do the P-switch next. So, because it's all stuff we've done before, I don't feel the need to explain this too much, so I will just do this, and you can follow along or pause the video, because it doesn't, I've already explained what it does. Okay, and then at the bottom, we can just slot the hold block here. That is definitely a benefit of making it its own block, is that we don't have to copy the same code 3 times, or even more if we want to have more blocks that can be held. Next up is the POW block. I'll give you a second to look at this. Alright, so in the POW block, this is going to be a little bit different because when we throw it, we want to explode it. So again, we're going to move sprite X up here, like we did before. Now, up here, above frame is less than 2, we're going to actually make another check for frame is less than 2. Remember, frame is less than 2 means that it is not exploding. In here, we will check if falling equals 0, just like we did last time. This alone will make it explode as soon as it starts existing. So we should also check with an AND that speed X is greater than 3. And this should be an abs of speed X, because it doesn't matter if it's negative speed or positive speed, either way. The speed X is going to be greater than 3 if we are throwing it. It will not actually be true if we are dropping it, so dropping it will not explode the POW block. If these conditions are met, then it will explode. So we're going to set speed X and speed Y to 0, and then start sound POW and broadcast POW explosion. If we drop it, we still want it to stop moving horizontally, even though it doesn't explode. So again, we'll check if falling equals 0 below here. Then we'll just set speed X, the speed X times 0.4, just like we did with the last ones. Okay, down here, again, we should make sure that held is 0. But here, we'll also want to make sure that frame is less than 2, because we don't want to be picking up an exploding POW block. We of course need to add our hold block at the bottom. Now we can try that out. Let's first try our P-switch. There we go, we can throw it and activate it as normal. Now let's get ourselves a POW block and see if that works. To make sure we can still move around with it as normal. We can drop it, yep, and it doesn't explode, but if we throw it, there it goes, it explodes. Now let's try throwing this against a wall. Now you see that doesn't explode, because when it hits the wall, its horizontal speed is set to 0. So let's make it also explode when it hits a wall. So up here, the top of the take POW, going to add an OR with an AND in it, and we're going to check if speed X this time is 0 and falling is greater than 2. This means that it is falling and it hit a wall. So let's try throwing it against a wall. There it goes. Okay, so that is looking great. Except that these blocks are just floating above Mario's head. That is not so great. So, it's time to put these assets that we got to use. So, we'll go into the Paint Sprite custom block. Now, in each of these, we're going to modify them a little bit. For example, at the bottom, we're going to have an if-else. This here will go in the else. In the if, we'll have holding is greater than 0. So here, we'll switch costume to Mario. Instead of walk 1, it will be hold 1. Now, we don't have any costumes for turning. So this, we'll check just if holding is 0. Up here, we'll again get our holding is greater than 0. This will go in the else. And the if part of it will be switch costume to Mario, hold 3. Alright, let's try that. There we go. Now our arms are going up. Okay, so that thing right there, that is a bug that I didn't fix. Let's go fix that now. In the PAL block, custom block, we will need to also down here check that falling is less than 2. So we can only activate the PAL block if it is not falling. So the trick to getting the bug to work was releasing it as we're going up, and you see that doesn't cause it to happen anymore. Now it's time for Koopa shells. So we're actually going to need to go to the Tick Goomba custom block. We're going to look at the place where a Koopa gets turned into a Koopa shell. We're going to need to set the width to width of Mario for the same reason we did with the other objects. Now we can actually go into the Tick shell. This is not quite as simple as our other ones were, because this one already has a touching Mario condition. The way we'll hold this is to start holding our hold key before we get to the shell. So that way we can distinguish kicking it and picking it up. So that would be if hold button of controls is greater than 0, not equal to 1, but greater than 0 this time, and holding equals 0. Alright, now in here, we will set held to 1 and set holding to 1, just like we normally do when we pick things up. And then we will stop the script to keep it moving into the part of the rolling shell. Now we need to use the hold block, or else this will not behave properly. So we'll check if held is greater than 0, and in that case we will use our hold block and stop the script. Make sure you put this at the very top above the not touching Mario. Now let's see how that goes. Get down to Koopa, jump on it, and we're going to hold the V key before we get to it, and then yep, we pick it up. Let's let go, and there it goes. Now that looked good, but let's try throwing it the other direction. You see, it goes behind us. Now there's an easy fix for that. Let's go into the hold block. Here we're going to, when we let go, point in direction of Mario. And the same thing in the bottom one here. Before I solve this, I feel like I should explain a little bit how the Koopa shell works. So, a frame of less than 3 means that it is just spawning. And it can't be bounced on or like kicked or anything like that. So a frame of 3 means it's standing still waiting to be kicked or held. And then a frame of above 3 means that it is rolling. So you'll notice in the if frame equals 3 that we have another point in direction block, and that is overriding our point in direction block here. So what we need to do is set frame to more than 3, because it will be rolling. We don't need to worry about that. We want it to be rolling. So we'll just say if type contains shell, and I'm using contains here just in case we want to add more types of shells that use the same code. If type is shell, then we will set frame to 4. Let's try that out. Okay, pick it up. Now that does indeed throw to the right. Wonderful. Now, let's see what happens when we try to drop the shell rather than throwing it. Okay, so this is what's happening. And that is not what we want. The reason is because we are still holding the V key when we press down, that it just picks it right back up again. And the reason it didn't happen last time with the other objects is because here we have if hold button equals 1, but this is if it's greater than 0. So again, we'll use the frame. Here it has to be 3. So if it's less than 3, that doesn't happen, at least not immediately. So if type is shell, set frame to 1. Now remember I said not immediately, that's the keyword, because in 2 frames it'll go back to being picked up. So in this frame is less than 3, we need to check if it is touching Mario. If it is touching Mario, then we don't want to increase the frame, because that would mean we might accidentally pick it back up. So we'll set frame to 1. Let's try that. And there we go. We drop it, and we can step out of it and kick it, and it behaves as normal. Now you'll notice that when we drop it, it's supposed to go forward a little bit. The reason it's not here is because we don't have a move sprite X blocks in this part of the custom block. So we'll stick a move sprite X block right there. We'll also want to do our falling thing to make sure it stops once it hits the ground. So if falling is 0, like before, we'll set speed X to round, speed X times 0.4. Okay, we will stick this right here. Let's try that. Okay, drop it, and it goes forward a little bit. Wonderful. Now, I think it would still be nice if we could pick it up while it was here, instead of having to step out of it and then come back in. So, to do that, it's very simple. We have our whole block, we'll just stick it right there, and easy as that. This is what's so nice about having a separate block. We don't have to copy our code so many times, we can just stick the whole block right there. Now, let's try this out once more, because there is a bug that needs to be fixed. So let's grab a mushroom, see what happens when Big Mario tries to put down a shell. Okay, that's some issues. So the reason that this is because Mario crouches when we press down, so the shell suddenly is no longer touching Mario. So in here, instead of it touching Mario, we can check if it's close enough to Mario by the distance. Distance to Mario is less than, and then we'll use the height. Height of Mario plus height. And stick this in here. Let's see if that works now. And that does work. Alright, perfect. Now that does mean you have to step a little further away from the shell in order to be kicking it, but it isn't too noticeable. So, I personally think that this is the best and easiest fix. Now, I actually don't have the Fire Mario code in this, but I'm thinking that Fire Mario might not work the best with this. It will work fine, probably, but it might look a little bit weird when he throws the fireball, so I might put in some more sprites for that. So there'll be a bunch of Marios doing a bunch of things in here. It shouldn't be too hard to add them. You just want to do things like we did here with the holding. If holding is greater than 0, do something with the new costumes, otherwise do the old costume things. Anyways, I believe that is the end of this episode. And I mean, I think it looks pretty great. I honestly think there's a lot you can do with this. And I'd love to see some of your levels. So, if you have projects you'd like to share, you can put them in the newly made tile-scrolling platformer expansion studio. And also, some of the things we did today are fairly complicated, and if you don't understand all of it, then don't be afraid to ask in the comments. I mean, you don't learn anything if you're just copying my code. You can't learn if you don't understand things. With all that said, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope to catch you in the next video, and goodbye.